Welcome to the 3 most used CAD features in Fusion 360. There's a reason that I'm calling it the 3 most used features in Fusion 360 because these features are what I go to most when I'm designing my woodworking projects in Fusion 360. So first we have parameters, which is absolutely by far my favorite feature of Fusion 360. Number 2, we have sketch constraints. This is so critical for making sure your design will update because inevitably you're going to change your geometry of your table. And number 3 is the design timeline, which is found all the way in the bottom here. Each of these 3 are critical to my workflow when I'm designing in Fusion 360. So let's get started. Number 1, parameters. They are so extremely useful. I can't imagine designing without them. They are located right here. Parameters. So I have set this model up. This is a trestle table where if I chose to change the width, rather than having to come in here in my design timeline, search for the feature that created this tabletop, I have that control right in this parameters dialog box. So if I wanted to change the width from 42 to say 45, it's as simple as typing in 45 and hit enter. And there are my model updates. This is so critical because rather than figuring out, maybe it's one of these features, I'm not really sure. Which one is it? Oh, maybe here. Let's see what there. Okay, there it is right there. So instead of fishing around looking for those features or looking for those dimensions, they're all pulled out in this parameters dialog box. So let me walk you through how to do that. I'm going to dive in here in my first sketch. This is my base outline sketch. This kind of controls the geometry of the rest of my table. So let's go here and edit it. So let me walk you through how to set up a new user parameter. I'm going to select this, hit delete. I'm going to press D for dimension. That's the hotkey for dimension. I'm going to select this line and pull out. All right, so right now we have a dimension, which is 45 inches. So I'm telling Fusion 360, hey, I want my tabletop, my width of this rectangle to be 45 inches. And Fusion is going to listen to me because I've told it to be 45. If I press enter, that's our dimension there. So notice here, I have this function. This is f of x is 80. So that user parameter is actually called tabletop length. So when I hover over that, it highlights and shows me tabletop length is the parameter that sets that. So right now, this is not controlled by user parameter. So if I wanted to change this, I'd have to dive into the sketch and find this and double click it and change it to something like 48. Okay, so let's create a new user parameter. All right, so I'm in my sketch tab right now, and I need to find my solid tab, which is right here. Now I need to find change parameters. And I'll have this plus icon right here for user parameters. I'm going to select the plus, and I'm going to name my user parameter tabletop width. And I'm going to call it 2 because I actually already have a tabletop width right here. So now that I have my parameter named tabletop width 2, I'm going to give an expression. So I want this to be 42 inches. Notice here that my unit is set to inches. I have a bunch of units that I can choose from, and I can also choose no units. That will be helpful if I were to, say, example, be creating a bookshelf with a certain amount of shelves. There's no unit involved in the number of shelves, so I would select no units for that instance. In this instance, we're doing 42 inches. You have the option to enter a comment. I'm going to leave that blank. So, okay. Here's my new user parameter, tabletop width 2, set to 42 inches. I'm going to click OK. Now I'm going to find this dimension that I want to set to tabletop width. I double clicked it, and now I'm going to call it table. So now you see kind of it's pulling up the 3 user parameters that start with table. The one that I want is tabletop width 2. And now as soon as I click this, it will evaluate and turn black. So now I'll press enter and it will change to 42 inches. There it is right now. So there's my 42-inch tabletop width. And that's how we set a user parameter. So as soon as I click exit, my parameter changes. So if I want to locate my parameters outside of the sketch, like I am here, I'm just in my model and I want to change that parameter, tabletop width 2, where I know it's going to change the length or the width of this table. I can go here and change it to something like 50. As soon as I click enter, my model update. And it looks like I did so successfully. So that's how you change a user parameter. And this is why user parameters are one of my favorite things in Fusion 360, because everything that I want or that I anticipate changing in my model, something like the stock thickness, so the thickness of my legs, I can easily change that to 2.5 if I wanted to have thicker legs. Okay, number 2 is sketch constraints. Sketch constraints are so important because they help your model update like you want them to. So let me make that more clear. If I were to go into my base outline sketch, click edit sketch, there is the sketch right there that controls most of my geometry in this trestle table model. Okay, so I have all of these icons right here. This is a midpoint sketch constraint. This is a parallel sketch constraint. These are symmetry sketch constraints right here. These are horizontal and vertical sketch constraints, and so on. So what I've done here is I've turned this rectangle that normally, as soon as I would sketch it, would be blue. I've changed it all to black lines, which means my sketch is fully constrained, which also means my model will update like I've told it to. So let me show you an example. I have the symmetry sketch constraints applied. I'm just going to delete them. Okay, so now this rectangle right here, you can see it's turned blue. It no longer consists of black lines, which means it is unconstrained, which means whenever I update my model, the design intent will be lost and my model will look goofy. And nothing happened yet because I didn't change any of my dimensions. Let's go to change parameters, change my tabletop length from 80 to 90. Okay, so let's look at my sketch now. So this line or this rectangle did not move relative to this edge like this rectangle moved relative to this edge. So that is not a good thing because now our table, as you can see, will be a little bit offset. That is not at all what we want. So if I were to re-add those symmetry constraints like so, I'll select this line, and then my midpoint line, the symmetry line. I do the same thing, this line, and my symmetry line again. So I can still float in this direction, which is not good, but I am constraining it in my left and right direction. So I'm clicking and dragging, and I can't move it. So I'm constraining my sketch, or to select this edge and this edge, and call them collinear. This edge, and collinear. Hit escape. Now my rectangle has turned black, which means my sketch is fully constrained, which means that when I change this dimension of 90 inches, my tabletop length, my model will update appropriately. So let's finish the sketch and let's see what happens. Change the parameters back to 80. And it looks like my model updated like I thought it would. So let's check that again, base outline. And it looks like I've done a good job constraining my sketches. So just a little bit of why you should constrain your sketches. Okay, third but not least is the design timeline, and that is found here in the bottom. This design timeline is so important because without it, you would not be able to edit and find your features that created, say, this table leg. So if I wanted to change this leg right here, I need to go find that feature that created that leg. So if I scroll here, kind of poke around, there, my extrude one, that leg, that's what controls this leg right here. So if I need to edit anything in here, I simply right click in my design timeline that feature and edit feature. So here I have it set to 30 inches. So that must be how tall my table is. Let's make it 35. And okay. All right, so my table grew by 5 inches. Now it's 5 inches taller. So the design timeline is also important because you can scroll back and kind of see how your design was made. So just like you can edit your features, you can also edit your sketches from the design timeline. So I know for a fact that my base outline sketch, this one right here, was the first sketch that I made in my model. And this is because this sketch controls a lot of my geometry in my model. So if I want to edit that, I can quickly come here and edit the sketch. Two more quick things maybe a lot of people just beginning in Fusion would like, and that's the component color swatch. You access that by clicking this gear icon and checking component color swatch. What that does is it'll show you, for example, these first two features in my design timeline. That correlates it to something in my browser right here. So let's take these three features right here. This extrude, this sketch, and this last extrude. It has a pink line over it, which means it correlates to my trestle foot. So if I were to select it, you would see it in my viewport, and you would also see it in my browser. That's really handy to help you correlate what feature goes onto what component or body. All right, the last thing is being able to scroll through your design timeline. This is extremely useful when you're trying to diagnose a geometry error or something else that went wrong in your model. Okay, just one more thing, and that would be creating groups from your components or your features in the design timeline. So if I were to select this last feature and this feature, all of these features that I selected are in my viewport. That is part of my tabletop, which is also underlined. I can add this to a group, right click, select create group. Now everything is neatly packaged in this group. So when I have larger models, this is extremely helpful because rather than seeing all my features as just one big mess in this design timeline, I have it nice and neatly packaged in here. So that is helpful for me, especially when you have a model that continues to grow. It just keeps things organized. That is one of the keys to designing quickly and efficiently in Fusion 360. It's having a good workflow and staying organized.